Broncos have signed their new franchise quarterback to a massive extension. I'm Joe Dolan, and this is the Fantasy Points Daily Lineup for Friday, September 2nd, 2022.
It's time for the FantasyPoints.com Daily Lineup. Staying on top of the latest news and updates around the NFL. Rise and shine, folks. We're taking the field. Here's your host, FantasyPoints.com's Joe Dolan.
Sorry for the late start, everybody. I was up screaming at my alma mater on national television last night. Very healthy things to do. Starting at quarterback today and for the next 7 years is the Broncos' Russell Wilson. The Broncos and Wilson agreed to a 5-year, $245 million pact that adds on to the 2 years Wilson already has left on his deal to tie the quarterback to Denver for the next 7 seasons. If Wilson plays out the contract, and that's almost never the case with quarterbacks, of course, he will be a Bronco through his age 40 season. In total money terms, Wilson's contract pays him less than only Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen. In guaranteed money terms, it pays him less than only Deshaun Watson and Kyler Murray. I still cannot believe that Watson contract. And in average annual payment, he makes less than only Aaron Rodgers. The deal is not fully guaranteed, but obviously this is a significant commitment to Wilson, who turns 34 in November. The Seahawks traded Wilson because they were unwilling to meet his contract demands. The Broncos, who literally have never drafted a franchise quarterback, seriously, look it up, they just poached them off of other teams, were willing to meet his contract demands. I'm not sure how well Wilson will age on this deal, but the fact of the matter is Denver had no choice but to pony up once it traded for Russ. And now it's Super Bowl or bust every year he's in a Bronco uniform. From a fantasy perspective, I've been comfortable drafting Wilson as a middle to back end QB1 because he has good receivers, but I'm just not sure how much he's going to run. Starting at running back today is a man who just returned to practice. Eagles running back Miles Sanders returned to practice on September 1st off of his hamstring injury that's kept him out of action since August 14th. Coach Nick Sirianni said Thursday before practice that Sanders has no return timetable, but is, quote, feeling better every day. And then minutes later, Sanders was suited up in full pads for practice. I don't know why. Like, why do you, what is the use of lying in a situation like that when you know the reporters are going to see him in 5 minutes? Coaches, man. But it looks like, barring setbacks, Sanders will lead this backfield in week 1 against the Lions. Hamstrings have consistently been a problem for him in his NFL career thus far, however. Sanders also was allergic to the end zone in 2021, famously. Despite 163 touches in 12 games, the back didn't find the end zone a single time. Meanwhile, Jalen Hurts scored 10 touchdowns on 139 carries. Boston Scott scored 7 touchdowns on 100 touches. And Kenny Gainwell scored 6 touchdowns on 101 touches. And the Eagles added a 4th body to their backfield on Thursday, claiming former 49er back Trey Sermon on waivers. Sermon fills the Eagles' open roster spot left behind by Jalen Reagor. He is immediately their biggest running back, so maybe he finds a role at the goal line, but he also needs to hope the change of scenery helps his eyesight, because in San Francisco, he looked like as if he had never seen a zone blocking scheme in his life. At our other running back spot is the highest paid one in the sport. The Titans have reportedly reworked Derrick Henry's contract to give their star running back a $2 million raise this coming season, Ian Rappaport of NFL Network reports. Henry will get more money than any running back in the NFL this year at $14 million. For all intents and purposes, Henry's current contract expires after the 2023 season, and he's cashing in on it in the meantime. Henry is currently the betting favorite to be the NFL Comeback Player of the Year with 5-1 odds, and in theory it makes sense because if the Titans are good this year, it's likely going to be on the back of Henry, given they don't have A.J. Brown anymore, and on Thursday, lost star edge rusher Harold Landry to a torn ACL. I haven't been aggressively pursuing Henry in fantasy drafts. He's coming off last season's Jones fracture, and I really don't have a great feeling on the Titans' vibes overall. But I'm glad to see one of the NFL's true bell cows get his just due here, and I'd love if he made me look stupid. Our first wide receiver spot is filled by someone on the Cowboys' active roster. Coach Mike McCarthy said Michael Gallup, quote, looks excellent and has avoided any setbacks in his recovery from his January ACL tear, Michael Gelkin of the Dallas Morning News reports. This comes on the heels of owner GM Jerry Jones telling reporters earlier in the week that Gallup would be able to play tomorrow if it were the Super Bowl. But here's what our Dr. Edwin Porras said about Gallup. Gallup was not placed on the PUP, but the reality is that his week 1 availability is highly unlikely, and this move is to ensure he is legally able to participate in on-field drills as he ramps up his conditioning. At just 7 months post-op, it would be incredibly risky to throw him out there. In fact, outside of Jerry Rice's ridiculous 3-month turnaround in 1997, there are no recent cases of a pass catcher returning at 8 months post-op and playing more than 50% of the snaps following a torn ACL. Lastly, all of the data shows that the safest return after an ACL tear comes at 9 months. That's not to say the research dictates what the Cowboys will do. In fact, there's no telling what Jerry Jones will ever say or do next, but the objective odds of a safe and fantasy-relevant return prior to late October/early November are stacked against Gallup. That was from Edwin Porras. Again, this is simply looking at probabilities in the science. I have no issue with stashing Gallup on my fantasy roster, but I don't expect him to be a big contributor for the first month of the season. By the way, I had to look into this. That Jerry Rice turnaround Edwin referenced, in 1997, he tore his ACL in week 1. He returned in week 16 and caught a touchdown pass, but fractured his kneecap on the play. It was obviously a reckless decision to return, and apparently Rice ignored doctor's advice. In 1998, Rice played in every game, had 1,157 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns. He was 36 years old. What a freak. At our other wide receiver spot, we have the Giants' Kenny Golladay. General manager Joe Schoen revealed Thursday that Golladay underwent an unspecified procedure. That language makes Pete Carroll proud, which resulted in him missing some time back in the spring, according to Pat Leonard of the New York Daily News. No word on whether this procedure was to blame for Galladay's slow preseason in camp. His ADP has justifiably plummeted, and there was chatter, though evidently unfounded, that his roster spot was not entirely secure. That might be a money thing, though, as the Giants would have to eat over $4 million in cap money by cutting the veteran wide receiver. Of course, that doesn't mean he'll be effective just because he's on the roster. ESPN's Jordan Renan wrote on Thursday that Golladay, quote, has been running routes this summer with the stiffness of a mannequin and was curiously on the field playing with the backups in New York's final preseason tune-up this past Sunday. Renan notes that Golladay played 51 snaps this preseason, the most of any wide receiver to make the Giants roster, and caught 1 pass on 4 targets for 6 yards. He also dropped a potential touchdown in the preseason opener. It was simply an extension, Renan continues, of what was on display at training camp practices throughout the summer. Minimal separation, limited explosion, sloppy routes. It doesn't exactly portend a bounce-back season. Golladay will play in week 1 because the Giants have injury concerns up and down the board at receiver, though it looks like the oft-injured Kadarius Toney will be ready to play. If the Giants get healthy at the position, Golladay is likely to be benched. In our flex spot, we have an update on the Commanders' Brian Robinson. Now, Washington placed Robinson on the reserve non-football injury list Thursday, Ian Rappaport of NFL Network reports. Robinson has to miss the first 4 games of the season on the list. His injuries to his glute and to his knee are gunshot wounds from an attempted robbery over the weekend. Rappaport also said there's, quote, a chance Robinson is ready to play by week 5, which is the earliest possible outcome, and is an utter miracle. He's lucky to be alive, and that's the most important thing by a million miles. But the fact that it appears he'll be able to continue his career in short order is incredible. It's the best possible outcome of a tragic situation. On the Commanders' active roster right now are 3 backs, Antonio Gibson, J.D. McKissic, and Jonathan Williams. Gibson is the obvious choice to lead this backfield in touches in the interim, though Coach Ron Rivera told reporters that Gibson is still in consideration to return kickoffs. If Williams is getting a decent number of carries in week 1, that's likely a sign that Robinson will have himself a role when he does return. I'm Joe Dolan, and this has been the Fantasy Points Daily Lineup. Remember to like this video, hit the thumbs up, and subscribe to the Fantasy Points channel for the daily lineup and all of our other videos, which we're blowing out this year. And if you haven't had your fantasy draft yet, it's a big weekend for that, I understand. Let us help. Go to fantasypoints.com for all of your fantasy draft needs with our projections, cheat sheets, and articles updated constantly over the weekend. And once the season starts, we'll help you make your roster as strong as it can be with our industry-leading articles, tools, and projections. Our week 1 projections will be out this weekend. What's more, use code LINEUP22 for 10% off any package. Good luck in your drafts this weekend. Have a great holiday. I'll see you next week for week 1.